Hello, Peter47890 Cyrus here, and welcome to another rendition of Sirus Gaming Corner, a bi-weekly gaming podcast where I, Swordfish1390, and Force Review talk about various gaming topics. From old games to new games, we aim to cover a wide variety of topics. So, how are you guys this evening so far?
Doing well. Glad to be on.
Good.
So, for this topic, it's a rather interesting subject, especially since Final Fantasy VII Remake recently came out. Well, at the time of this recording. What we're going to talk about is what is perhaps two of the most polarizing mainline Final Fantasy games, at least to its fanbase, and talk about our thoughts on it and which game we prefer. That is to say, we're going to talk about Final Fantasy XIII and Final Fantasy XV, which is kind of funny since Final Fantasy XV was initially supposed to be part of the Final Fantasy XIII games, sort of, with it being a spin-off of sorts initially, with it using the same mythos as Final Fantasy XIII, with a different cast and different story, but stuff changed and then it turned out into its own thing and into Final Fantasy XV. It's also pretty funny with how, when you get down to it, Final Fantasy XIII and XV are polar opposites in terms of game design. One has a story about defying fate, one has a story about stepping up to your destiny somewhat. One is linear as all hell and then open up, sort of, near the end of the game. One has an open world approach at the start, then becoming more linear near the end of the game. One has turn-based combat system, one has real-time combat system. So, yeah, pretty much damn opposites when you get down to it, even if they do fall within the JRPG subgenre. So since we're going to do a direct comparison, I guess we should talk about each game's presentation first, story next, gameplay after, etc. I think you get the point. So presentation wise, I think both games looked really good when they came out. What do you guys?
I think they're like two of the most gorgeous looking games for their like respective generations.
Yeah, they both look good. For especially 13 being a PS3 and 15 being a PS4 game. For their for their consoles, they look great.
I said the only thing that would determine if you like one more or the other is just the general art style in general. With Final Fantasy XIII being more futuristic, scientific, and fantasy-ish, while Final Fantasy XV tried to go for the fantasy on reality shtick that it marketed a while back. Personally, I probably like Final Fantasy XV designs a bit more, just because I think it looks a bit more sleek. How about you guys?
I think they both have their own different appeals. I could go back and forth either, to be honest.
I like 15s more, but because the game doesn't run quite as good, I like 13 more so, because the game seems a lot more stable.
Music wise, this is a hard one because both of
they're
them
both
are pretty good.
They're both pretty damn good.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm gonna give very, very slight edge to 13 because I think there's a little more variety in the instruments.
Okay, yeah.
And I think that they're all like of really high quality. Not that 15's tracks aren't of really high quality in themselves, but I think 13's feels a little more varied, I think is the best way I could put it. And I do like how there's also some vocal tracks here and there. They sound really nice too.
I think, now that I think about it, the music doesn't stand out to 15 quite as much as 13 did. So, yeah, I'd have to agree with that.
Plus, I mean, man, you got like Blinded by Light, one of the most awesome battle themes.
Let's see. Is there any other part of the presentation we can talk about, really? Let's see.
I mean, other than maybe voice acting, I guess, which I think they're both pretty good.
Yeah.
Although I would say the voice acting in 15 reminds me of 12. Because there's so many different types of the way they speak. Because in 12, like one sounds like he's from Britain, one sounds like from, Finland, one sounds like from America. The voice actor remind me of 12 in that regard.
One from New York. The Dino guy.
Oh, yeah. He's like that fucking Goodfellas dude.
Yeah.
So to me, I think the voice acting is more varied and different in 15.
Yeah.
It's a lot more variety to it over 13, in my opinion.
Although you do you got two characters in 13 who have Australian accents, which is pretty.
Well, one sounds like you can't figure where they're from.
They're from a different world, so.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying, like, there's also a little variation, I guess, but still.
Let's talk about the story. Now, talking about the story, Final Fantasy 13, 15 is kind of interesting. Because Final Fantasy 15's story is kind of incomplete. With it, like, leaving a lot of things in the background without really... It just, like, pushed them under the rug, kind of, and then just moved on. While Final Fantasy 13 story initially is really confusing because they don't really explain concepts well, so you're just left what's going on here.
Yeah. I was gonna say both games follow this pattern of confusion, where 13 kind of main core story was about being a l'Cie or a fal'Cie and turning into a crystal when you've completed your focus and living on this cocoon planet that was created above the main planet of Grand Pulse. People who I guess was destined to become a Seath or a l'Cie got banished into the world of Grand Pulse because they considered you a threat to the rest of the human race who could be infected and turn into a l'Cie or eventually a Seath.
It's more that like Grand Pulses l'Cie. That's what they're called, right? Branded them.
Yeah, they're well.
The l'Cie were branded by the fal'Cie.
Yeah.
Yeah, the l'Cie are run by the fal'Cie. You're a Seath when you either don't finish your focus.
So you turn into a Seath. So the main character focus is like against Cocoon, which is their home.
Pretty much, yeah. Because
originally they couldn't figure out what their focus was. Because obviously they just became a l'Cie. So they didn't know what their focus was. They had to figure that out. It just kind of wasn't given to them.
It doesn't help that the only hint they have is like a prophetic dream that only shows them like few images.
Yeah, it's like a really hazy image.
Yeah.
The other problem with the game, they never explained about how their branding evolved. Like, it didn't really explain the things that would force the branding to get wider with the eye in the middle. So it either came down to how long they had to finish their task, or it came down to other factors, maybe stress, maybe.
Well, actually, that was it's actually just that. It's both a combination of time and also like the more negative emotions you have, the faster it progresses.
Yeah. Okay.
At least you get a summon out of it, kind of.
Well, my issue with the story isn't so much that it's not really understanding more of Cocoon, not getting to see the other side of, besides the l'Cie, fal'Cie, and Seath aspect of the story. You didn't get to see Cocoon. You didn't get to talk to the people there or get to know the other side of the world and their I guess life around this whole thing and the planet below, which is where they came from, like Earth. As you notice that the world is destroyed, you never get the sense of the urgency or the people feeling like they want to go home. Like their home is a place that's not safe. You don't get that feeling that they can ever go back. But you don't really get to see that kind of thing because, unfortunately, all the characters are fugitives. And so that kind of affects how the game, as Peter said earlier, it being so linear. It's just you don't get this.
I will say this. I think it is interesting how the game frames the story as being a fugitive story. The story just revolving around a character being on the run. I think that's pretty different from other RPGs, where
you're literally enemies of the planet.
Yeah, there are other RPGs that got you being fugitives and criminals, but usually you don't get found out until you get to explore a bit. But Final Fantasy 13 fully commits to this vision and makes the game wholly linear. So to make the fugitive storyline to feel more, I guess, pronounced.
Well, it feels more, I guess, grounded in the way it's structured, because I mean, like, when you think about it from a contextual standpoint, like, not only are these characters on the run, they're also on the clock, because if they don't do their focus, they're going to turn to Seath. So I mean, they don't exactly have time to walk around playing triple triad and breeding chocobos.
But I do think it's interesting how the story like turned out that way. It's pretty different from a few other RPGs.
But because it's like that, it unfortunately creates a split in the community, whether they like a game structured that way or not. Me personally, I at first enjoyed the game. Initially, when it came out, I liked the game and I liked the way it. I guess to say I understood the game. You know, when you start to sit and open your mind and you play it, you understand it more. If if you go in it with zero expectations, because the game had a lot of negativity, I should say, when it came out, because of how it was structured. I had a chance to play it and beat it. I felt I understood the game a little bit and understood where the developers are going with the game. That I was able to accept the changes and the design they went with. While there are some things I didn't agree with, I had fun with it because there were elements of the game that felt like Final Fantasy, but the thing was people wanted it in the game, and it wasn't until the end of it where you had to do everything at the end of the game to feel that experience of Final Fantasy. So it put a lot of people off.
I probably say this also. I say the most interesting part of the story was the fugitive part, and where the characters were split apart, and with each like story arc in the game focusing on two characters, you seeing what their deal is, their growth. But then when they get together as a party is where it gets, I don't know, boring for me, and where it goes typical save the world plotline, at least for me.
It's most Final Fantasy games, though.
Yeah, but I don't know. I just felt like once they're like in the party together, like it just gets boring.
Are you referring to the part when they leave Cocoon and go to Grand Post?
Yeah,
that's where the game feels like it kind of slows down to a crawl.
Sort of, yeah.
That's when you can do like all the side quests. So it kind of.
Well, the problem with the side questing and the Grand Post in general is that the game just feels like the story just it fell asleep.
I like how all
the story didn't wake back up until you started leaving Cocoon and go back to. I'm sorry, leaving Grand Post and go back to Cocoon to do the final part of the story. But
I like how the side quests in Grand House are all just feed X monsters because this statue of a Lassie told you to. That's basically all.
Yeah, I didn't really understand that one.
Like you're supposed to.
I mean, they made for good and challenge side bosses though, at least.
Like in terms of story, they're basically nothing.
Yeah, no, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
It's like someone just decided, hey, we need to give this game a reason and not feel so linear. What should we do? Oh, you just create a bunch of little coin-like statues that float.
Yeah, let's just make it that Grand Post is now a deserted place.
It kind of feels thrown into me. Grand Post feels like when they were developing the game, it was like, we need something that makes this game feel like an old Final Fantasy game. Like they were almost done with the game. I was like, wait a minute, we didn't give this game any variety, like any soul, like any exploration. It was linear up to now. We had it easy, guys. What should we do? Just make a planet. Sounds like a good idea. That's kind of how I feel. I don't know. I'm kind of mixed up Grand Post, honestly. I feel like Grand Post is like the most boring part of the game. I didn't really like it much. I didn't like the whole idea of running around this big old field. Cool, you get to ride a chocobo, but it just felt like it felt like they needed to have it there just to be there. They could have literally just left the game linear all the way to the end, and I would have been just fine with it. But I don't know.
See, that's the thing though, is that like the linearity is obviously the thing that's criticized the most out of it, and I'm gonna level with you here. I just didn't care because it kept the game moving. It didn't, screw around with any filler. It just kept things like it just went from point A to point B. And I mean, could the levels have been a little bit better designed and have a little more to them? Sure, but like I didn't find it to really hurt my experience that much. It just
it doesn't affect the experience of the story and characters, but I do think Grand Pulse is where everybody who weren't liking the game and realized they had to do a lot of grinding probably stopped playing it. I think that area broke a lot of people from finishing it. It's just structured so differently.
I just think it's really funny though how you look at Final Fantasy 15 and like their attempt to fix quote the linearity backfired because all 15 does is follow the exact structure of 13 but just reverses it.
Yeah,
it does, and a lot, and then opposite, where people probably broke the.
I think that fits Final Fantasy 15's vision a bit too, just because the open world fits the theme of Brotherhood really well in terms of its mechanics. So
sure,
yeah.
Well, the thing about 15 though, it's about guys on a trip, going across the kingdom to get to for Nox to get married.
Mm-hmm.
But like,
problem with that is, you need to watch a movie and an anime to actually complete the game.
Right. That's the one thing. That's another thing I think 13 does better is that like 15 relies on this on a bunch of whole alternate media on top of like many paid DLCs. Whereas like regardless of how you feel about 13 itself, it's like it was released as a complete product. Like when I got 15, before I got the collector's edition, I literally had to sit there and watch Kingslave before I could even start the fucking game. Whereas 13, I could just boot it right up and it's good to go. I didn't have to sit there and watch a 2-hour movie.
Yeah, and if everybody else wanted to watch the anime, they had to watch the anime either through their digital deluxe edition. Oh no, I'm sorry. You had to buy the movie that came with Kingslave as a limited print. If you want the physical,
you want to learn the backstory of Noctis and the boys? Watch Brotherhood.
Yeah, I mean,
it's at least on YouTube for free.
But that just shows.
It is, but like the thing is though, is like I'm gonna be that guy. Like I shouldn't have to seek out alternate media. Like they definitely should have made all those backstories that we see in Brotherhood in the game in the form of side quests. Like you could do like. Finding this side quest will lead them to like reminisce about this, and then that leads to this backstory, and then yada yada.
That stuff could have been included into where you could have seen a cutscene that showed in the past to a point.
Right.
The game felt disconnected to all the other content. Not even that, but even that 2D game that came out as a DLC.
Mm-hmm. Coming back to Final Fantasy 13 for a bit, I think I figured out why I didn't feel as engaged in the first half. I didn't feel as engaged in the second half as I did the first half, because the first half got like this sort of tension of being on the run, but then the second is like mostly about fulfilling their focus and about the main antagonist. I forgot what his name is.
Bartendalus.
Bartendalus. And I think what makes the second half boring is just because Bartendalus isn't that engaging of a villain.
Well, plus he's so kind of like he's admittedly like kind of out of left field, and it's not until way late into the game that he actually makes himself known. So
yeah,
well, not only that, but
I think Arden is definitely a much better villain by comparison.
Yeah, not only that,
but that's what makes 15 story still to be engaging, just because of Arden. Mm-hmm. Why Bartendalus is just a whatever villain.
We can all agree Arden is a good antagonist.
I mean, he's done as well as he could have given the circumstances of the game as a whole, with the development hell. Yeah. But like, I think another problem that people have with 13's story, and I agree with this to an extent, but I think it's a wee bit overblown, is how certain things are only really revealed in the data log, which certain things, there are some things that really should have like key plot points that should have been explained in the game somehow or in the data log, but in defense of the data log, I feel that a good majority, maybe not majority, but a very, very large chunk of the stuff that you see in the data log is really just supplementary info. Like, I don't know if like for anyone who's out watching this has played like Mass Effect, it's kind of like the Codex, where it tells you information regarding lore and world building, but the vast majority of it is just just that. It's not doesn't keep pertinent story information from you. And I'm not saying 13 doesn't do that, because like I said, certain things really should have been shed light in the game itself. But like there are certain things where you'll read the data log and I'm like, oh, that's cool, but is this really worth putting in a cutscene and having this explained to me, like this little thing? I just feel like it's kind of blown out of proportion.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as far as me, man, I'm pretty much saying what I need to say about 13 as far as the story, because I'm under the impression, as I left it when I finished it years ago, that I enjoyed the story to a point, and I enjoyed the characters to a point. I like the game overall. Most people dislike it, but at the end of the day, could I see myself going back playing it again? Due to some issues with how Grand Post is so difficult, the enemies act like individual boss fights, very grind heavy, limited on gil to the point it's almost impossible to get gil. You have to freaking scavenger hunt to get gil by selling items. It doesn't lend itself well to want to replay it again, so it's a game I probably will never go back to. Even though I like it,
let's see.
I wouldn't go back to it again.
Let's talk about characters.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead.
I don't know. You want to say something?
I was just gonna quickly say, like, yeah, okay, there are definitely issues with the way it's handled and told, and admittedly, like, there are some plot holes which are, you know, totally valid criticisms. But at the end of the day, I think that I really, really like the setting. I'm a really big sucker for sci-fi and futuristic settings, so that really screamed to me, instead of just kind of like a standard fantasy world with dragons and shit like that. So we had a really clever world. The lore is interesting, and while there are some issues with how some certain story beats are presented, I actually did find it interesting, because I like the world. I like the characters, which we're going to talk about anyway, so I won't go into too much depth. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was interesting, and had some pretty memorable moments, and yeah, I liked it.
The characters of Final Fantasy 13.
Boy, is this a polarized cast.
Yep. Like I said, the only character I like is probably Saz and Fang. Saz and Fang. That's pretty much it. Like, Lightning is so boring to me. Like,
well, she was kind of supposed to be a female Cloud, so I mean that's kind of what they were going for.
See, Lightning starts off kind of like Cloud in the sense that she's kind of cold and unfeeling and dedicated to her goals, but like the thing is, something I like about her character is the way that when like there's a part in the game early on when they kind of split up for a bit, when all the party splits up, and then she's teamed up with Hope for a very large chunk of the game, and they actually kind of bring out like the good qualities in each other. Like Lightning kind of becomes like sort of a big sister figure to him, and then I think that this actually like really starts to kind of soften her character up, and then like especially because another thing too is she's really not a fan of Snow, who is the fiance of her sister Sarah, but like once she starts to like kind of warm up to him, and she realizes that she was just being actually pretty childish to him and saying that like, oh, you're not good enough for Sarah, this that, but then they actually make amends, and that was pretty big of her. So I don't know. I also think it's cool just to have like a badass chick as the lead, and yeah, I liked her character.
Like, I just found her mostly boring. Like,
oh, you Forrest?
Yeah. Me. I don't know. They don't leave an impression on me. I think I had two characters I prefer Cat. Was it Saz and maybe Fang?
This is exactly what the Peter said.
They're about the only two characters I care about. Saz being cool. He just has personality. He has a chocobo chick in his hair.
Well, plus the whole arc with like him and his son and dealing with that was really
that was really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
My only issue with Vanilla is that her voice acting just crosses between trying to figure out if she's from Finland or Australia. So the whole time I play the game, like, where are you from? You don't sound like you're from one country. You sound like you're from many countries.
So like, Lightning's boring. Snow is a dumb idiot.
Oh yeah, I would say Hope is hopeless.
Hope is annoying, but understandably annoying because of what he thought Snow was responsible for.
Plus, he goes through a lot of like
character growth
stuff throughout.
Yeah,
I think people don't I think people undersell like the fact that he actually does mature.
Vanille is whatever. She's nice.
The funny thing about Vanille is when I first played it, at first I thought she was unbearable, but like throughout the course of the game, her backstory starts to get revealed, and then you'll see that like her overly over the top upbeat personality is really just a mask because she's actually completely broken emotionally, but she just does that just to keep a happy face for people.
Yeah.
To cover up her own insecurities.
I think her most interesting part of the story is mostly around Saz.
I really love that father-daughter relationship that they had. It felt like really genuine.
And then the guilt she feels about Saz's son becoming the Lassie. So I thought that was really interesting and gave some depth to her character. About her,
and plus that ended up creating...
not being like a citizen of Cocoon and being the enemy of of Cocoon. So,
yep.
Yeah.
They created some good conflict between Saz and Vanille too when he found out about it.
Yeah, that whole like how he was conflicted on what to do with her in terms of knowing that she had basically had his son taken away from him essentially.
Yeah.
I think that was all of them.
Yeah.
All right, let me see. So I said my piece about Lightning already. Like I said about Hope too is, I think Hope basically gets the Shinji Ikari treatment. Like, he's a kid, and everyone expects him to be badass. I just think it's not really. People would have like sort of a fight or flight response in the.
I think it's more like Emil from Tales of Symphonia 2, almost kind of.
Yeah, that too. They get similar treatment for that, and I mean. Again, it's just, I don't know. I feel like I wouldn't really think any more rationally than he would. I think I'd probably just be sucking my thumb and hoping it all gets better with time instead of actually doing anything about it. But again, like, he has that grudge against Snow because he believes that he was responsible, or at least indirectly responsible, for the death of his mother. And then he does try to, like, there's even a point where he actually almost succeeds. He does try to take vengeance, but then ended up not happening because they got intervened by soldiers or whatever. But after they kind of got over it, like, Hope even admitted, like, this is like the character growth I'm talking about. Like, he even admits that the whole time he really knew that Snow wasn't responsible, but he just needed a goal to keep himself going because he's a Lassie, and his life is basically forfeit. Like, he has no worth anymore. Everyone wants him dead, so he's like, you know what? I'm gonna avenge my mom, and that's gonna be my goal. That way, I have worth for myself. And then he even admits that he was wrong. He shouldn't have done that, but that's why he was doing that.
But yeah, like, I understand his character. It doesn't mean like his character though.
Yeah, likability is it kind of varies from person to person. And as for Snow, like, he does come off as kind of a bumbling idiot, but on the other hand, like, this is actually like roughly the same part when Hope admits that he was wrong. Like, Snow basically admits that he was being kind of naive so when Sarah became Lassie, and then he's like, oh, our goal is to save Cocoon and blah 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 blah, and he's like just being overly optimistic, but then he admits that he was like in denial. He's just like, just not thinking rationally. And then like we talked about him before, but yeah, even people who despise 13 admit that Saz is a good character, so I don't think we really need to cover him. Like, the whole thing with his son, like, that was really poignant. I really like that.
Yeah,
and Fang is pretty cool. Fang is a cool chick.
I was gonna say, I think the characters, to me, they don't leave an impression. Like, the game really, it's kind of your average characters for the most part. I didn't really have a huge attachment to any of them. I don't know.
I probably say I'm the same, in that the only one who gave me an impression was Saz and Fang, and I like Fang just mostly for personality, not really her backstory, because she has
I actually
really
find
personality.
I like Fang a lot, but I actually thought that she was the least developed.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything like bad about her character. Yeah. I just think that they didn't explore her backstory as much as the others.
I just think I like her because of her personality.
Oh yeah, no, I agree.
I do like how gung ho she is, sort of.
And plus, I like that whole like, it's really sweet how she has that overprotection for like Vanille and how they're always there for each other. That was very nice. So like she's portrayed as like a badass chick, but she's also got a soft side to her when it comes to Vanille. I think something I like about this cast, especially compared to the 15 cast, is just how much more diverse and varied this cast is, because they all come from different walks of life. They all have their own motivations, like, and they even butt heads with each other a lot, which I think creates some good tension between them. Whereas like in 15, there's really nothing like that. They all come from the same place. They all want the same thing. So there's not, and there's
I wouldn't
not
say
a whole lot of conflict. Not completely, but
yeah.
No, there's conflict, but it's not to the same extent. Like especially in 13 when all the cast meets in the third chapter of the game, except for Fang because she's not there yet. Like just the fact that no one's on the same page. They're actually almost all strangers to each other, and they're all freaking out because they had literally just become Lissee, and no one has a clear head. So it's things like that I think make them kind of feel more a little bit realistic, I guess, because of how they're put in a shit situation and no one's thinking rationally, and they're just acting out of anger, and they're actually all taking the blame. They're all playing the blame game to cope. They're like, oh, we wouldn't have been Lissee if it wasn't for you. Like it's like a kind of a basic human coping mechanism. Like something bad happens to you, you have to blame someone. That's like the first thing you do, and that makes you feel better. So it's things like that. I think for 15, I like Noctis and the guys, but I feel like the only character that has any sort of substance is Noctis, whereas the other guys, they're cool and they're likable, and I love the chemistry and the banter, but they're just they don't really have anything to them, unless you watch Brotherhood. But even then,
I probably say I do like Final Fantasy 15 cast better, just because they have that brotherly dynamic to them.
Yeah, that was nice.
And they like the game develops a lot of its resources just trying to develop that brotherhood feeling within its game, within the story and gameplay. You see this with how, like, during battle there'll be some banter, and sometimes they even high five Noctis. They do this through techniques with how, like, the only main interaction in combat from the brother in the main combat is using their techniques, and so you're commanding them with Noctis, which develops that theme I was talking about earlier. And then just the whole road trip part of the game, just basically building up on that theme too. How you see them hanging around in the car, them like hanging around in hotel rooms, playing cards with each other, them like interacting with each other in the camp screen. It's really well done how Square Enix managed to pull off the theme of brotherhood as strongly as it did in Final Fantasy 15, and it shows in the neat interactions between Noctis and Gladios, Ignis, and Prompto, yeah.
I think I definitely like the main four, but I think 15 fumbles in the side character department, because you have like some really interesting looking side characters. Like my favorite was Aranea, and I also did like Iris, and I liked Sid and Cindy, but like they all just they show up, and Core too. Like they all show up and they're just like swept under the rug. Like what's the point of them?
But yeah, I think the game did the 4 characters as well as they could. And that final cutscene, the final camp cutscene, was pretty powerful, I think.
That got me.
Yeah, it was a pretty sad moment at that one.
And like, I know we mentioned him before, but I do think Arden is actually one of the better villains in the Final Fantasy series. He's really engaging and interesting. He has a great backstory, and is just a great character.
He's just a lot of fun with how
he's a really charismatic character.
Charismatic and how flamboyant he can be.
Mm-hmm.
And then you find out his backstory in like one of the DLC and it's pretty heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
As the saying
goes, but it's paid DLC.
Yeah. But even without that, he's still a really engaging antagonist in the main game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say that honestly, he was actually my favorite character besides Noctis.
I consider him the A-team of JRPGs.
And I really like Noctis as a protagonist. He's like the most laid-back guy. Fine.
He's really down to earth.
Yeah, he's really down to earth, and he really does feel like a kid being swept into a destiny that's like above his head currently, above his maturity level. For this, he was just like hanging around with Prompto, Gladios, and Ignis. Like, he knew that he would have to take over his father's throne, and that sort of pained him with how he saw his father kept getting weaker. But he's pretty much just a normal, everyday guy. And I like that normalcy. It makes him relatable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny, like, when you look at Noctis's design, he looks like he's going to be, like, just an edgelord loser. And then
he's not.
Play the game.
He's like this...
Yeah, he's not.
He's almost like this awkward dweeb, almost.
Mm-hmm. He's like a lovable dork.
Yeah.
Basically what he is. Mm-hmm. Which is nice. No, I hate the edgelords. Yeah. Angsty.
What do you think?
But like then you have other characters like I said, the side characters, and then like, Luna. They portray her. Yeah. They portray her like she's going to be the main heroine. Yeah. You see her like 3 times in the whole game.
Yeah, I only care about Luna just because Noctis cared about Luna, but I didn't care about Luna because I knew Luna because we didn't know Luna because she's barely in the story.
You literally could rewrite a couple of things and take her out, and nothing would change. You can make someone else the Oracle who's like more relevant to the story. And oh my god, like the fucking death scene with her was just laughable. Like, it's just, hey guys, let's do Aerith 2.0. Get killed the exact same way by this. It's just so bad.
Well, what do you think, Forrest?
Well, me, character-wise, I like all of them. I think they really do mesh well, especially being that they were raised in like a kingdom-like setting. They still don't understand each other very well. But this gives them opportunities to kind of open up and evolve and actually learn each other on this trip. So I think over time they evolve and grow. And in one case, they get injured to a point that almost blinds them. But they still, through thick and thin, they still, even when they get older, they get older. There's a time period where the game forces Noctis locked away on an island, and he wakes up much older than he was, and that makes him a lot more mature. I kind of felt that way in the last chapter of the game, where I felt the character did mature, and the other guys did also.
I also like how in Final Fantasy 15 you can see the events of the story affecting Noctis more and more, even negatively, just because he's like, as the game progresses, he's feeling the brunt of the responsibility that's been thrust upon him. And it's really interesting to see how he reacts and even interacts with other characters, especially with Gladios, because Gladios is like, want to push Noctis into making the right choice and not to wallow in self-pity and actually do something about the situation. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, when you really get down to it, it's done really well. It's done very well, and honestly, the game gets misunderstood. But as me and Sword mentioned once before, the ending makes up for all of maybe some of its flaws.
I say the strongest contention with Final Fantasy 15 story is mostly that it's unfinished, just because it leaves a lot of plot points either unexplained or half cooked, like with Luna.
And you have events that happen off screen too.
With like the Emperor of Niflheim, I think. That's the like he gets killed off screen. You don't even interact with him as Noctis.
Yeah.
And then Luna's like entire relationship could have been delved much more in the story, and so
and plus you don't see them together as adults either, too, which doesn't help.
Yeah. I know she gets taken out too soon.
And even
the other problem,
even Noctis's father, like he seems like a nice father, but the game doesn't really focus enough on him. You only see him like at the start of the game, really.
You only see him again if you see Kingsglaive too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kingsglaive gives you a lot to see about him.
Yeah.
But not in the game.
But like, you shouldn't have to watch a fucking movie to play the game.
Well, I'm going to say this about the story. The game story to me, as you guys said, it's unfinished. But I didn't really feel like I didn't get an experience out of it still. The ending made up for all of the flaws it had because it was so impactful and so empowering. And it was kind of sad at the same time. I really liked the ending of the game.
I will probably
like it so much to the point that it actually made up for the mistakes it had. Originally, I didn't like the game story, but when I got to the end of it, that changed my whole perspective. Even if the game had a unfinished story, its ending was really good, and it made up for that, to me at least.
The problem with 15 story, aside from the fact that it's just not finished, is how it's structured. Because it seems pretty clear to me that, I mean, obviously I wasn't at Square Enix, so I really don't know what was going on, but my take on it is, it seems pretty clear that their main goal, or one of the main goals, was to fix the linearity problem of 15. So it feels like a large chunk of the game was spent just, hey guys, look, open world. And then because of that, the story outline actually takes a back seat. And throughout the majority of the open world parts, there's really not a whole lot of plot that even happens. It's not until the linear part comes, which isn't until the last 7 hours of the game, where the story starts happening. And even then, it's like, it's so rushed at that point that it just doesn't utilize all of its concepts that well.
It really doesn't. I think I still give credit to Final Fantasy 15 open world, just because, like I said before, it builds a brotherhood vibe you get from Noctis and the gang. So it's always constant. It's always constant with an open world, and
that's fine. But like, if we're talking like overarching story, it really suffers. Like nothing happens. It's amazing how nothing happens.
There is two things I like about the game. Running out of gas and running into a wall, because it just feels great making Noctis run the car into the wall and wrecking it for some reason. That I like.
I think that 15 really has an amazing world, and I also really like just the concepts that it has.
I really like how I really like how you can get like all the warrior arms, the extra warrior arms you get is extra, so there's an incentive to explore the world, with each like having a sort of unique dungeon to them.
And then what's even cool about the game is that you can pimp your ride too, and it really feels like you're playing a TV show that was like, Gangsta Kitchen came into play.
They definitely needed a better balance between handling the overarching story and how to utilize it in the open world, because it's just so late by the time the actual story kicks in. And here's the other thing too, is once the linear part happens and the story starts happening, when you get down to it, it's really not much of an actual plot. It's more like a series of set pieces. Like, okay, we're on a train. Oh, look, demons are attacking the train. Let's stop them. Okay, then we'll talk a little bit. And then, oh, look, Magitech troopers are attacking the train. Oh, look, Prompto fell off the train. It's more of like everything happens in that goddamn train too. But like,
really, I feel like the last part of the act.
I feel like there's only.
It feels like
there's like three important parts to the story, but like the intro, and then when you get to the water city, I forgot what his name.
Altisha, right? I think.
Yeah, the train, the train, Niflheim, and then the ending part where all the world goes to hell.
I really feel like the story really was important was in Niflheim, especially the main, like seeing the characters get injured.
Like the part between
that part of the game really kind of that and the part where you're in where you don't have no way of attacking anybody.
like the part between the intro and getting to Altessa is like, but it's like mostly introducing a few characters like Arden and Dragoon Lady.
I think what they were going for at the beginning of the game was it being them on a road trip. Yeah. Them, you know, it was more like the guys hanging out and
I think that part
kind of like
yeah, that's fine, but
kind of like a bachelor party in a sense. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, that was the last time Noctis is single. Let's just go out and have fun. Let's go camping. Let's do these things we couldn't do before he does, before he ties the knot, and that's it.
Yeah, but
that's kind of how I felt. But
there's nothing really interesting that happens plot wise during that part.
Yeah, like Brotherhood
I get
great.
That, but I think that was the whole
chemistry is great.
Yeah.
What I'm saying though is that's what I'm saying. I do think that's what their intentions were, regardless if it's boring to you or not. Yeah. It's just the way it's made. It's this idea of, well, it's not about the story, it's about the characters. It's about seeing them out of their royalty.
But the thing is, you can have a character-driven story, but also have the storyline be coherent and not a mess. Well,
unfortunately, we can't fix that now. It's what it is.
They tried to with the DLCs, but
well, even then, I don't think they could salvage the main game. There was no way.
No, it's just putting.
So it was more or less like, here are the events of DLC. What led to the issues that happened in the world of 15. And these DLCs give more of a prior backstory to the main game. Was it necessary? I don't think so. Okay. Unless you're talking about Arden, then that was necessary.
As for which one I prefer personally, I'd probably say Final Fantasy 15 still, just because because Noctis is such a likable character, as opposed to Lightning, which I just found really boring. And I do like the camaraderie and the closeness that the brothers have compared to Final Fantasy 13. Why they get along at the end of the game, but I don't think they felt like family like the brother does. Not like in terms of the whole group dynamic.
Characters for me, overall, which one I prefer better? Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, I really like every character in 15, unlike 13 to where I only like 2. I like the characters a lot because each one helps to balance them as a whole. So if you don't have Noctis with the other guys like Gladio and they don't really mesh well without them. They kind of ride off each other to make them who they are. So if you don't have them there, it makes them feel boring. And I think that's kind of one of the reasons I think kept me playing the game was because of characters. I wanted to understand them more and get to see them evolve was one of the best aspects of the story. Getting to see them mature, getting to see Noctis mature. And yeah, it's kind of sad. I felt like Noctis was never given a chance to really be who he needed to be as a king, never got a chance to be who he should have been married. And he never got to fulfill other than to do what his duty was. Yeah. And I kind of felt sad for Noctis through the whole game, honestly. Especially the end of the game, I felt more saddened by his situation because he didn't have no way out of it. There was no, I quit. I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to live a normal life. He didn't have that. He didn't have that opportunity, nor did he have a choice to. I mean, you could say he probably had a choice to maybe just not care, let the world suffer in the darkness of Arden for all eternity. He could have chose that route, but he thought too highly of himself to do something like that, and to leave not only Insomnia as it was, which is a fitting name for a city if you think about it, Insomnia, darkness, but to say Noctis didn't really care, I think in the beginning he only cared for himself, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact he knew deep down he couldn't leave things undone. It was a bloodline that he needed to sever and fix, because it didn't really involve him and him making it his fault. It's just something that unfortunately found him to be the person to fix it all. And it's just a sad story to me, to have that heavy burden on your shoulder that you can only fix this problem that was created a long time ago. It had nothing to do with you. So just you being a bloodline, a heir to the throne, is the reason you're subject to this cruelty. And that's kind of how I felt about the whole game. It's just, it's a saddening aspect to a life that you didn't want. It was something you just wasn't chosen to get, but you were thrown. It was forced upon you at birth, and it was your destiny. And that's just a sad reality of it.
How about you, Sword?
As for me, controversial hot take, but I do have my reasons which I'll get into. But I give it to 13 for the. We already mentioned, and this is something I stand by, that, and this is irrefutable, that 15 story is just not complete. When it was released, it's just not complete. It is not a whole product. 13 was released, complete from top to bottom, regardless of how you felt about the game itself. It still came, $60 price tag, you got a whole game right there. With 15, you got chunks of story missing, and you got to pay for DLC to see things that weren't in the game, and yada, 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 yada. For the storyline, like I mentioned before, 15's just story structure is just not good. The whole open world arc, despite, I agree, the Brotherhood theme is presented really, really great. It's fantastic. It's really wonderfully handled, and the Noctis and the guys are really likable, and that's all great. But the overarching storyline is next to non-existent. It's only very lightly touched upon, and very few things just happen. And this open world part is like 80% of the game. Once the game goes on rails and the story actually starts happening, there's really not much story still, because like I mentioned before, it's really just a bunch of set pieces. Like this happens and then this happens, and then it's just a bunch of random shit that just happens with no real rhyme or reason. And as much as I like the guys, I think we didn't really get into this too much for the sake of just kind of getting through the video, but the thing about the characters in 13 is that they all do have an arc of some sort. We did talk about them briefly, but it's there. There actually is some growth there. And in 15, Noctis, he grows a lot. He definitely matures, but I feel like he's really the only one that has any semblance of development, because he starts off as a kind of a kid, almost a brat at times, to an honorable king, that's great. But everyone else is just kind of static. Whereas in 13, they're all, it's such a varied cast, and I mean, how you feel about them individually is really just up to preference, honestly. But I actually did like them for different reasons. Thought they were all interesting. But and the other thing too is 13, the story structure, it follows a proper 3-act structure. It has a beginning, middle, and end, and it's just, it has, regardless of how you felt about the quality of the story, the fact of the matter is it's still a competently presented story, if that makes any sense. So that's my take.
There's one thing I want to add to what you just said about your thoughts on it. I was going to say, the thing that I get what you're saying about it feeling like it's not structured well, I can understand why you feel that way. And to a point, I never got that same opinion about it, because unlike most things about games, I try to find the core things that make me enjoy a game regardless of its flaws. I try to leave that last, because if I overall find the game fun, I can overlook some things that make me appreciate the money I spent on it. However, in 15's case, because the game was not finished and because it ended up having these DLCs added, did that make me feel like I spent my money wisely? Should I have waited for Royal Edition of 15 instead of buying the $90 Steelbook version that came with a movie that I already bought the Steelbook for the movie too that came with Brotherhood? I don't know. Even when Royal Edition came out, the DLCs weren't finished. And when they went to announce 3 more DLCs, they got canceled. 2 of them did, besides one of them. So the game still isn't finished, technically. because those aren't even released. So even now, the game is still unfinished because 2 DLCs were canceled. And I think they were canceled because of some things that happened at Square Enix. Some things got shuffled around. Luminous Productions, I think, was closed after not being open very long, and Hajime Tabata left the company. There were some things that unfortunately kind of shook things up. Some speculations that maybe they didn't really agree with Hajime Tabata's ideas of the game. There was apparently some things that people didn't like about him, and I think that had a lot of conflict with 15. So, given all the situation of the game being thrown around, being canceled, being suspended, being just kind of thrown around for 10 years, I think hindered the game ever really being truly allowed to be flourished like it should have been. And for that reason, it really is sad to see a Final Fantasy game go that route for the first time in history of the Final Fantasy games being released. I don't know if I don't know if Square Enix will ever at some point go back and acknowledge the mistake 15 was, and maybe in the future. I know it's kind of maybe 20. Can't believe I'm saying a remake, but you never know. Maybe 20 years from now, who knows where we'll be at? Maybe 15 will get the service due diligence that it needs, because I don't think the game really got the time it needed to shine, personally.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's talk about the gameplay. Let's see. Final Fantasy 13. We already say how linear it is, and it really is linear at the start. Like, literally, the hallways is just a straight line. It doesn't even try to hide the fact that how linear it is. And like, I don't even mind that linearity. I mean, I would like to see some more options of exploration, but I'm okay with that linearity. What I do mind though is probably how slow the combat opens up. Just because of at the start, I like how the game is focused on this like fugitive plotline, but then at the same time, you're still reduced to only using 2 people in the party, and there's like a limit to how many paradigms they have. So the amount of options you have during that part is pretty limited at the start of the game, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like, some people said that the fugitive part of the game is basically a giant tutorial. And while I wouldn't go that far, it is really limited in terms of options you have. And it's not like and really, when you get the Grand Pulse, you're able to give everyone into every role basically, and then mix match to what you want. So I can see why people think that the Cocoon section was just basically a giant tutorial, even though I do think that's a bit going a bit too far.
Mm-hmm. Like, sure, it opens up a little too gradually, but I do think that, like, I agree that the glorified tutorial thing is a bit overblown.
Like, I do agree that it limits off too many options, and that makes the combat really simple, just because it's so straightforward what you have to do. Because you don't have as many options. Let's talk about the combat now, I guess. The combat system is interesting because it's an ATB combat system. Like, the main thing you'll be doing in combat is changing paradigm shifts, and paradigm shifts you're basically changing job based on the current situation. And the main way how you do battle is by attacking, and mostly by filling an enemy stagger bar, by doing attacks from a certain row that increases the stagger bar, and once it's filled, you basically go ham on them. And when you're in trouble, you go to your defensive roles, that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm really oversimplifying it, but it's been quite a bit of time since I played Final Fantasy 13, so I don't really remember all that well. Maybe Sora can fill in more details.
That about covers it. I mean, you have 6 different classes. You have one for dishing out physical damage.
Sentinel, Ravager, Saboteur, Medic,
Synergist, Commando,
and Commando.
Those are all of the
like Sentinel is your tanks.
They like draw enemy attention away from you, and then they basically like take all the heat.
Saboteur is for debuffing. Medic, it's pretty obvious that it's healer. Ravager, I can't remember.
They're your black mage.
Yeah, you're a black mage, and Commando is basically it keeps the stagger bar to be steady, rather than dropping. Like if you don't have a Commando, then the stagger bar would drop a lot more faster, and
that's why you got to have a combination of a Commando and Ravager in your paradigms
to be able to build up stagger bar well. And I do think
because the Ravagers. Okay.
And I do think that part of the combat is interesting. Just having to decide which role you need for the current situation, and then mix matching. And it's fun still because the enemies in this game are decently challenging.
It starts off as a cakewalk, but it does build up quite a bit.
Maybe it builds up too much for Forrest's taste, but.
I don't like the fact that the game goes from being, a breeze step whip, of difficulty. Then all of a sudden, like someone just put the wall up and just said, oh, "Try to climb that." Yeah, but I don't know.
Yeah, combat system wise, I'm pretty okay with the game. It's just the other systems revolving around it that I have a slight problem with.
I definitely like it has, like, despite it technically being turn-based, it does have that feeling of real time to it, also because you got to be precise with your actions and when to do it and when to switch paradigms. It's not just a standard, like, active time battle system like the older Final Fantasies. It's got a bit more, it's definitely more real time than the other ones, I guess, is the only way I could put it.
Like...
I do think it's kind of lame that you can only take control of one character. I think it would be nice to switch between the others, but I feel that the AI is competent.
You know what's one thing I don't like about the combat system?
Is it
your main character dies? Yeah.
Yeah, what is this fucking Persona?
Like last Sirus Gaming Corner, I said I was okay with Persona just because the main character is so versatile. This is not the case because your character, the character you're controlling, doesn't really have any more options than the other characters, really. So I don't see the reason why you dying, like the character you're dying, would result in a game over. Like, I understand it happening in Persona just because of balance, but I don't see any reason for MC dying equal game over in this game.
Overall, though, I do think that the combat is fun because I love mixing and matching the different roles and then trying to figure out what works best for what situation.
Oh, wait, there's one more. What do you thought people saying? The game plays itself, man. You just do auto battle.
That's only the case for the first couple of chapters. Otherwise, they're full of shit.
That's not even the case. If you really want a game that plays itself, go play Final Fantasy 12 and put on the gambits and have fun.
But even then, So you have to like organize your gambits and.
I mean, yes, like that's true, but like at the same time, when you're actually physically in combat, you're not doing anything.
But the satisfaction part of the combat system Final Fantasy 12 is seeing how your pre-planning of your
I get that.
come to fruition.
I think, I mean, I don't want to delve too off topic, but like, I do think 12's combat shines most in boss battles because your gambits aren't able to cover every single situation during those fights, so you're more active. Yeah. But anyway, circling back.
I say like Final Fantasy 13's like main appeal is just basically mix matching your roles and figuring out which roles will be the best for the current situation. And then it's the satisfaction, and then it's really satisfying to build up that stagger bar. They go stagger and you unload on them, and then you see how much damage they do. That's really, really fun to see.
What are you, Forced?
Well, to be honest, I like the game. The game's combat too. I have this issue when I really start to think about it, I have to sit outside of me playing the game. I like the game, but I'm too busy nowadays to go back and play a game again like that. So would I ever say I go back and play it again? As I mentioned earlier, I would never touch 13 again. It's just the grinding you have to do at the second half puts me off completely. I just could never go back to play it again. I would say I like it, and when I played it, when I had more time to play it, I liked it back then. I did a lot of the side quests and stuff in the game. I did like the combat. I did like the whole idea of job switching. I didn't like the fact that the main character could only be controlled only, and it took a persona approach where if you die, that's it. Other than that, I could not see myself playing it again. It's too long-winded. It's too grindy. And because of that reason, I don't like the game in that regard. I like the game at the beginning till you get to. I don't like the Grand Post part of the game. If Grand Post was not so overly grind festy, and it was more simplified to give you a choice to kind of streamline it to where you can continue the story and it didn't feel like filler. I could see myself replaying the game again a couple of times. I could see myself doing that, but in the state that it's in, I can't do it.
Okay.
I just can't. So I'm kind of mixed. I like the game. I'm mixed on the fact if I were to play it again because of that reason. So more or less, I would say I think I'd play 15 over again more than 13 in that regard.
Oh boy. Oh boy. That's
no. Let me clarify something here. If the game wasn't so grindy and it had a more streamlined approach to its combat that made it not so grind fest, I would play 13 again, and I will probably say I'd play it more so than 15 because 13 is a more of a complete game, as Sword mentioned. But in its state of it being grindy, if I had to choose which one I would play again, when it comes to its core gameplay, I would play 15 again over 13. But when it comes to which game I like better, I'd say 13 over 15.
Okay.
I'm kind of mixed in some regard. One game I like more so than the other in terms of which one I feel did a better job of combat and it felt flowing and natural. I would say 15 does. If I had to pick between which one had a better cohesive story and it finished and it started, I would say 13. Which one had better music? 13 definitely. Which one seems like I would have a good time with? 15. Only because I didn't really find the whole Cocoon thing all that. I mean, Grand Post Cocoon and the Fauci thing. It's okay, but I think I like the journey that Noctis and the other guys had, Prompto and all of them. I think I preferred more. But I'm more of a mixed person in regard. It just depends on the mood I'm in.
Okay.
Which one I'm feeling for. And in terms of combat, I would think 13, I have to be in a mood to want to play that game again. So it doesn't necessarily mean I don't like it. It's just got to be what mood am I in to want to play it. 15, I could be in any kind of mood because I think the game just warrants itself to be a lot easier to get into and play. 13, because it had that long-winded tutorial section over every chapter, and it just felt slow moving. And chapter 7 is where the game starts to finally open up, where you're controlling Saz and Vanilla at that point. And I didn't like it. 13 just feels slow. slow to build its combat up, slow to let you do what you wanted to do, slow to let you look at the paradigm to upgrade the characters. It just slow moving and then grindy. It's the way I would describe 13 in a nutshell, and that's just how I feel about the game.
Oh boy.
So
okay, what I was gonna talk about is Final Fantasy 13's like leveling system and its weapon upgrading system, because the leveling system in Final Fantasy 13 felt kind of pointless via the Crystallarium system. Just because like it tries to be the sphere grid. No, it's not the sphere grid. It looks like it, but it's like wholly linear. To the point where what's the point? Just have a traditional leveling system. You could be that linear.
I mean, you've got to be a little thoughtful in how you spend your points, depending on the role you want to upgrade. Yeah. But there's not a whole lot to it.
And then the weapon.
Especially, you get your crystal points, and then you just get your stats.
An upgrading system. I felt it's so mishandled. Just because almost every weapon you get initially have the same stat as your base weapon, but then the only way you know if it's better is if you upgrade it. But then that costs resources that you don't know. So
it's not the best crafting system in the world. I like it in theory, but
I just feel like since you don't know if it's going to be better, like why should I waste resources on it? As for the gameplay in Final Fantasy 15, it's polar opposite. Firstly, it's an action combat system where you see, basically run around the world, fight monsters, complete side quests, yada yada, usual open world. And the combat system is basically an action combat system where I can't remember the controls on it now because I remember it being kind of weird. Basically, have like you can basically use multiple weapons in Final Fantasy 15 if I remember right. And you basically have like each weapon like have its own moveset kind of, but like the problem with Final Fantasy 15's combat system is that you never really needed to use the different moves each weapon have. You can just spam just attack on the enemy, and then the weapon, the item balance is pretty iffy, just because you can spam items in the game without any repercussions.
I never had one game over because of how easily exploitable the items are.
And I'd probably say combat system wise, it's really simple to its detriment, just because nothing really changes from beginning to start. Because like there's no new abilities you learn. You learn new techniques, but that's mostly just on using like building up meter. You don't actually gain new moves.
Which is weird because like in the Final Fantasy 15 demo, Noctis did have his own techniques, but then when they took it out and then gave it to the other guys, but I feel like it doesn't have that same level of oomph to your actions. Like in the demo, I'm able to do like normal combos and then follow up with a special attack, but in the final game, they took that out and I can't do that anymore. So it feels like all I'm doing is just swinging my sword, waiting for the enemy to go down, and then there's just not much to it. Pretty straightforward.
Like, there's some parts of the combat I like how you can teleport attack. It's like pretty satisfying. Cool. It's a really satisfying stinger type of attack, and I do like how there is depth to its combat system, kind of, just because each weapon have its own moveset that's sort of useful, and you can look cool. There is a skill difference between a person not knowing what they're doing and to a person who knows what they're doing. But it just felt like the combat, like the enemy design, never really accommodated like the amount of depth, like supposed depth the game combat system has. and it felt real. And it doesn't help that the combat never really evolved beyond the start, just because like the only new abilities you get is techniques, and that's really only a special attack, really. So not really something you do like by minute gameplay. And then a phase shift dodge, which basically if you dodge right, you save a bit more MP, but that's like so. Like
it's not a terrible combat system, but there's just nothing to it,
yeah,
really. I think
nothing
that's the biggest
to
problem.
Yeah.
And again, the like you're invincible with the items as long as you're stocked up. Like even if Noctis's HP hits 0, the game pauses and gives you the opportunities to Phoenix down, and then you can just come and get right back up. Like it's you'll never die.
I would say the Armiger mode is a pretty interesting Devil Trigger type of mode.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, you just like blast the enemies with your weapons. You teleporting everywhere. It's cool as all heck.
It is. And I guess the leveling system, which the Ascension grid, it's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
I like how you get AP in multiple different ways, not just from killing enemies.
Yeah.
Like you'll get it from long road trips, you'll get it from catching fish, things like that. I thought that was a neat thing. You'll get them also from leveling up,
from discovering recipes, from eating, and I do like how each the way how AP is earned is through like not only from Noctis's but from the other brothers' activities too, to what they usually do. Because monster hunting is like usually Gladius thing. Cooking is Ignis, and then Prompto is like taking pictures. Yeah, taking pictures because you can take pictures in the game. I think
So
and I like how the AP is you like shared amongst the party. That way you got to put like a little more thought into how you spend your points.
Yeah.
I don't like though how like the later ones. Like, I get why they would cost more, but they cost so much that it's so grindy to the point where I don't even want to do it. Like, it costs like 1,000 ability points for certain ones, and that's just asking for way too much.
Yeah, I was going to say the mini games in 15 are a lot of fun. Sorry, guys, I had to step out for a minute. But, the mini games are fun. The fishing part was really interesting because it gave you some cool other things if you did them. If you did the fishing part. Me personally, my favorite mini game in the whole game is driving the car. Just because you get to change the music and you get all these other songs from other Final Fantasy games when you're driving around that you didn't hear in some of the games in a long time. It's just kind of cool to see kind of historical Final Fantasy soundtrack in your car when you're driving around.
I do.
It feels kind of nostalgic in a way.
If there's one thing I want
to add, because that's kind of what I would do in Final Fantasy music while I'm in my car in real life. So
if there's one thing I have to add about the car, I do think that it was trying to simulate being on a road trip the most with how automatic it is. Because when you're on a road trip in the passenger seat, it does feel that way. We're just staring around the environment, passing the time.
So. What was also cool too is the fact you can let the car auto drive itself, and you can just sit there and just listen to the music.
Yeah. So
it really did feel like you was on a road trip with them when the game plays. So like I like the weird quirkiness behind it overall. I enjoyed the laid back approach to 15 in that regard.
And I do like how there are optional areas you can go in the game to get like your royal arms. Like that's really cool, and you have to go do it yourself with the story not really needing it.
And then a part 2 I like also was at the end of the game, it gave you a reason to explore with the car when it flies to areas that you couldn't get to normally on the map. You needed the vehicle to fly to, but the problem with that is the car, you had to land it precisely in the right spot in the right specific way, because if you didn't, the car would literally crash and burn. It was one mountain area you had to go to. It had to be very precise. You had to land the car exactly. And it took me numerous tries to do it. But the dungeon area itself is this weird area where you walk on these stairs and your character goes upside down. It's the most confusing dungeon I've ever seen in any Final Fantasy game, because you literally were just kind of like upside down, right side up, sideways. So there's some cool like hidden dungeon areas. Have some really cool boss fights after you finish the game. That is well worth your time to do. Because like with any Final Fantasy game, there's always some cool things you can do afterwards. And I think 15 had a lot of really cool moments in that regard.
But yeah, I think a problem that I have, like, because we were talking about with how 13 is super linear, which it is, but then 15 kind of takes the opposite direction. I appreciate the vast world, but I just think that it's just so barren and empty. And then it's like aren't even any like cities in it. It's just gas stations, really. And then then the only side quests in the game are just fetch quests. Like, they're really boring. Like, I had to find dog tags like 10 times for this one guy. Like, it's ridiculous.
So to be fair though, in real life, you may run across one city and a bunch of gas stations.
Sure, but this is
especially where I live. You got the major city, and then once you leave here, gas station, Buc-ee's.
I guess, but
now I get what you're saying. I get it. I mean, but you know the other problem too? The other cities don't feel connected. The place where you're going with Noctis, supposedly where you were going, you don't feel like you ever get there. You know what I mean? So you never really, the world feels disconnected. Because you have that one city on an island, and you have to take the boat ride. And then, like, the game kind of forces you to this other continent where the opposing military is fighting Insomnia. So everything just feels, it's just kind of written in, but not really feel like it's connected. You never really feel like when you're in the main, area where you're kind of driving around, you never really get people talking about Niflheim much. You never get the sense that that's his other place. You know what I mean? I never got that feeling at all. It didn't feel that way to me. It didn't feel like these other places existed until they got mentioned, and then here they are. This is how I felt. Did y'all feel that same way?
I don't know. I mean,
I'm not sure. Never thought about it.
Yeah, me neither. But yeah, I mean, that's just how I feel. Like, I think there are other RPGs, like Japanese RPGs, that just do an open world better. Mostly like Xenoblade Chronicles, I think, is the best example of how you do an open world well.
Like, the barrenness did bother me, but it's not like the first time I see an open world this barren in a.
No. Yeah, I'm not saying that it's the first one, but I mean, it is still something like. I just find that's just the problem I have with many open world games. Like Bethesda games do the same thing, like just running and running and running and running.
That's one of the reasons I couldn't see myself playing Fallout and all that stuff, because I don't like games where you just have to run around and do these fetch quest missions. And that's actually exactly one of the reasons I don't like Lightning Returns, because it's fetch questy and just pointless to me. So
I'm just saying that it didn't bother me as much, just because I'm used to other open world games.
Yeah,
I kind of like seeing all those monsters in the background when you're driving by. I like the world. I thought it looked cool. It had a weird aesthetic to it. Like, you can see there was a previous war long ago that kind of damaged the land to a point.
I think the night mechanic is pretty interesting in Final Fantasy 15.
I never explored that enough, Peter, because I was too afraid.
Yeah, but if you go exploring around at night, you get these powerful iron giants that basically gank you, and they're pretty tough. So I do think it ties well into like this ongoing theme of light versus darkness, and how the darkness is winning over the light as the game progresses. But yeah.
Then it becomes Hallway Simulator. Just flips the switch.
So, I think that's all we have to discuss about the gameplay, really.
I'm trying to think of what else there is.
What did you guys think about the controversy with Cindy?
Controversial what?
There was controversy with Cindy? Oh, why? Because of her design?
Oh,
yeah.
It's what?
That and the fact that there weren't any female characters in the party, and a lot of people didn't like the fact of that.
Well, I mean, the theme of the game was brotherhood.
Yeah, that's the main theme around it.
I mean, I get that, but even though I understand that, there are people that don't still have issue with it.
Well, they didn't get the point then. They're fucking morons.
You do have a point.
I mean, like 10-2 had a cast of female characters. Nobody threw a hissy fit about that.
I don't know about that. I knew some people that had an issue with it.
I mean, I didn't have a problem with it. I mean, the problem I had with those characters is they were just annoying characters. I didn't feel that they were female.
We could always discuss this another time, but I personally
10-2 is its own video.
Yeah, I personally didn't have issues with the characters. Actually, I like 10-2 more than 10 in some regard. But that's another time. Yeah, sorry about that. I do.
That's the next video.
I saved my thoughts on 10-2 on a later date.
Worst sequel ever.
It wasn't a great sequel, but I think its gameplay was pretty good though.
It's not the worst sequel. The worst sequel is Devil May Cry 2.
Okay, second worst sequel.
No, okay. If we're talking about worst sequels for Final Fantasy games, I would be Lightning Returns. I'm just saying. I'm sorry. That game is trash. I'd rather play 10-2 than Lightning Returns any day of the week.
I will say 10-2 is more fun to play with the battle system.
That's what I mean. I like the combat of 10-2 more so. I don't like Lightning Returns because it was fetch questy. Like you can literally fight enemies in that game; they have no purpose. You don't level from fighting enemies. You level from fetch questing in Lightning Returns.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think of what else there is for 13 and 15 at this point that we haven't talked about already.
Did we talk about the music? Which one we like better?
Yeah, we did.
Honestly,
I mean, we talked about structure. We talked about the combat, leveling, side activities. I mean,
we talked about the characters, the presentation. Did we talk about graphical fidelity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which one performed better?
I think that's all. Like gameplay wise, I say they're about even for me. Like
they both have their pros and cons.
I like the combat of 13 a bit more, but I do like the overall exploration in the open world more than the exploration of Grand Pulse. So it's give or take.
Yes. If I had to pick which one I like to explore more of the world of, it would definitely be 15 over 13.
I think I agree. I do prefer the combat of 13. I think there's a little more to it, and I just think that, I mean, it's just like a big problem with 15 was like we talked about how exploitable it is with the items. Like in 15, I didn't die one time in my whole playthrough, as well as the end game, like the post game content. 13, I died like a lot because of I either didn't arrange my paradigms properly or whatever. Like I can't just exploit it willy nilly. So combat, yeah, I think Ascension Grid is a little bit better of a leveling system because it just doesn't feel as on rails, and you got to put a little more thought into how you spend your points. If there's anything wrong with the Ascension Grid, I just don't feel like all the upgrades are that substantial. I mean, there are like you get techniques, accessory slots, things like that, but some of them just feel kind of like, oh, that's nice, but that's really about it. I also think the wait mode is really awkwardly done the way they do. I didn't think we mentioned that yet, but there's an option to like have the game kind of slow down to a crawl where Noctis stays like stationary, and then that pauses the game, and you can like analyze enemies and stuff. But it's really awkward.
I'd probably say Final Fantasy VII Remake is like a evolved concept, the wait mode, in terms of how.
Mm-hmm. I think that was done well in Remake. I think Remake is like the height of Final Fantasy action combat.
Yeah. But we'll discuss that later.
Oh yeah, we'll talk about it another time. But 7's combat is a more refined of 15 and 13 mixed together.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's why I
think combat 13. Mm-hmm.
That's why I say it's interesting talking about 13 and 15 right now, just because 7 Remake is like.
But I mean, before we finish, I will ask this question.
Yeah.
Since 7 is out and we've played it, for those wondering, some of us are almost about to finish the game. Some of us are still trying to get through it. It's because it is pertaining to something that I think, we are talking about 13 and 15. Do you guys think that the 7 Remake takes a lot of elements from those two games and actually makes it its own thing in the end?
I think it's more
I would say so.
More similar to 15. But I mean, it has elements of 13. But yeah, to answer your question, yeah, probably. So overall, I think what is the verdict of the games?
I might like Final Fantasy 15 more, personally.
What about Forrest?
I like 13's I like 13 because in the beginning it's fun. The music really sets you in the mood of the game. And I think the music for me is really pumps me up to want to play a game because it just makes the game feel alive with the music and the vocals and things. So in that regard, good music, good good environment, good characters. In the beginning, I like 13. Unfortunately, if I'm talking about an overall aspect, um, interesting characters on a road trip, I would say I like 15 more than 13. So, God, this put me in a tough spot. If I had to pick one game, I don't know. I'm undecided, honestly. I really can't give an honest answer right now. Because as I mentioned earlier, it depends on what mood I'm in. If I want to go with a grind fest game like 13 or go with one that doesn't have a finished story, but the gameplay is competent enough for me to finish it. And it doesn't feel like I'm grinding for hours just to progress the game. So, Sword, I'm gonna have to say, man, I'm undecided.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just how I feel.
And then I'm in the 13 camp, even though it's gonna bring up some torches. I just think it's again, I know I'm sounding like being a dead horse spirit. It's just a complete product, which is like a big thing for me, and it has a properly presented story in the sense that it has a beginning, middle, and end. It's follows the 3-act structure, whereas 15 just doesn't really. It just kind of like random set pieces happening. It's just kind of all over the place. And I just thought the game, despite it being on rails, which again, like I didn't mind the hallways. Like again, could they have been better designed? Sure, I'm not denying that. They could have been a little more open, give you a little room to stretch your legs. But it just didn't bother me. I just didn't care. So because of that, it made the game have a good pace. It kept everything going, and I found the combat fun. So it was just an overall enjoyable experience for me, and I found the storyline interesting. I did like the characters. They all do have an arc. They're all very unique and interesting and diverse from each other. And I don't know. I liked it a lot. I had a good time with it. It has problems, sure, but I just found it to be a better made game from top to bottom than 15, despite 15 having its own merits. I just didn't like the open world of 15. I just thought it was really kind of boring to explore, despite the Brotherhood theme being really prominent and being really well done. But the storyline also really suffered because of it, and I just found the combat not terrible, but I just found it really basic and not a whole lot to it. So, yeah, I mean, I don't like despise 15 or anything, but I don't particularly like it either. So I just if I were to go back to one of them, I would say 13 is the one I would go back to first.
Well, I think that's everything for today. That's this week's rendition of Sirus Gaming Corner. Hope you guys enjoy it. This is us signing off. Later, guys.
Peace out.
Bye, guys.
Oh, yeah. My bad. Have a good day, guys.